Trump's man-made economic crisis, the one that currently threatens the life savings of Americans from coast to coast and all across the ideological spectrum, is straining even the most reality-challenged corners of his once airtight grip on the information landscape. The Dow today started out positive, only for the rally to fizzle. The Dow ended the day down more than 300 points. Stocks plunged after the White House announced that there will be no reprieve on tariffs for China. A whopping rate of 104% would be imposed on imports from China starting at midnight tonight. Donald Trump's tariff stink bomb is causing all sorts of economic and political chaos. It has even strained the relationship between Donald Trump and his co-president Elon Musk. Sources telling the Washington Post this, quote, over the weekend, as Elon Musk launched into a barrage of social media posts criticizing one of the lead White House advisors for President Donald Trump's aggressive tariff plan, Musk was going over that same official's head and making personal appeals to Trump. The attempted intervention has not brought success so far. Elon Musk's feud with that advisor, Peter Navarro, continued today. Musk calling Navarro, quote, dumber than a sack of bricks, end quote, and a, quote, moron, after the other guy, Navarro, dismissed Elon Musk as not a manufacturer, but a, quote, car assembler. Assembler in a CNBC interview with the third Trump guy, Joe Kernan, who, as of right now, sounds pretty skeptical of the tariff plan. Take a listen.
They're much bigger. I think they're much bigger than most people thought. And I think from policy institutes on both sides of the aisle, the methodology that was used has been universally derided as being non-serious. I think you'd have to concede that this was not the market reaction you were looking for. There's a way of maybe incrementally trying to accomplish some of the things that the president wants to do in a reasonable, serious way. And this just almost across the board has caused what you're seeing in the stock market and a lot of head scratching and head shaking on whether anyone really knows what they're doing in this case, Peter.
It's the stupid, right? As the old political axiom goes. Well, that feeling that nobody knows what they're doing in the Trump administration is the predominant view on Wall Street, even among Trump supporters who have a direct line to Trump or top Trump aides. Brand new reporting in the New York Times reveals that an all-hands-on-deck effort to persuade anyone in the Trump administration to back down from the tariffs has failed. From that report, quote, the day after the president announced his most sweeping round of tariffs last week, chief executives from major banks, including Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan Chase, had a private meeting with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. It was organized by a lobbying group in Washington. But Lutnick was not persuaded to reverse course. Over the weekend, mega donors to Trump's reelection effort tried a different tack, pleading their case in calls to Susie Wiles, the White House chief of staff, and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Those efforts also came up empty. New York Times reports that much of the conversation now centers around protecting themselves from the worst effects of Trump's trade war, which even some Trump allies now say will lead to a recession. Fox Business host Maria Bartiromo, who went all in on Trump's 2020 election lies, which she said in doing that, along with a few of her other colleagues at Fox, cost that network $787 million. But even she, of $787 million fame, cannot brush off the reality of Trump's tariff disaster. Watch this.
It is going to have an effect on Main Street. Some things will become higher priced. We will see some products actually, be raised in price because companies will pass on the cost of tariffs to consumers. I would expect that. That's why you have some people saying that we could see a recession. We'll see a growth slowdown.
For her to say that, big deal. Tensions within the Trump coalition bursting out into public view as Donald Trump loses his grip on the narrative that drove him back to the presidency. This is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. With me at the table, executive editor and New York bureau chief for The Economist, Charlotte Howard's back, plus MSNBC political analyst, host of the Bulwark podcast, Tim Miller's here. Also joining us, former Congressional Budget Office Director and American Action Forum President, Doug Holtz-Eakin is here. Doug, let me start with you. And just some economic basics. I liked what Joe Kernan said there. I think to talk to a Trump advisor and say, think tanks across the ideological spectrum have universally derided the policy, and it is non-serious, is sort of an attempt at public shaming. And I wonder what you think. It's been my conceit for 9 years that they have no shame.
Well, they certainly have not changed direction. So I don't know what you can bring to this argument. Is it additional data, the observations of foreign leaders, shaming, or, the economic conditions, higher inflation, perhaps a recession? I don't know what would change their mind. But certainly this is a very dangerous direction. A simple analogy is that we're working like mad to avoid a sunset of the 2017 tax law because it would be a tax increase of $400 billion next year, and that could cause a recession. He did that by himself last week. That's very dangerous, and it's something that ought to be unwound.
Well, let me argue it from the other side. As someone who's been covering him for 9 years, I had the same feelings about weakening NATO by siding with Russia over Ukraine, and that didn't persuade them to not destroy NATO. Do people in the business world still think he'll be persuaded not to destroy the economic order?
I don't know what the evidence would be that would change his mind. He's got take the tariffs on Canada and Mexico. To what end? What is the benefit that those tariffs are supposed to produce for the United States? He's never enunciated any goal or objective for those. If they're negotiating ploys, what's he trying to negotiate? If there's some great trade misgiving there, I mean, what is it? What misdeed is in place? There is no articulation of that. So it's very difficult to have an argument with someone who hasn't laid out why they're doing what they're doing. They're just saying, I love the word tariffs, tariffs are good, and that's where we are.
Where do you think we're heading?
I think we are headed for a recession. I'm in that camp. I was concerned about the state of the economy prior to the announcement of the 10% universal tariff and the so-called reciprocal tariffs. Those are much too big for the current state of the economy to bear. And, the Federal Reserve probably can't rescue the economy at this point. So they'll do their best. My expectation is the economy will slow noticeably, that the Federal Reserve will cut rates to try to accommodate that and give up the fight on inflation, and we'll find the worst of both worlds. Rising unemployment, inflation reigns at a higher level than we like, and that's something that no American needed to go through, but that's likely where we are.
So, Charlotte, what's important about the Trump coalition, the sound that we played in the introduction,
Sure.
Seeing things get scary enough to sort of to say the things that Doug is saying. What is going to happen is what people warned would happen if tariffs on the scale were announced. There was a belief, there's always a belief that one, he can be talked out of doing a thing that hurts millions of Americans. Two, that there's anyone around him who can get to him or break through to him. I mean, his daughter didn't come back this time. That should dispel that rumor and misnomer once and for all. And three, that the bad thing that happened isn't the desired intent. How has the business community, Charlotte, changed what they think about the man over the last 4 days?
Well, I think inherent in your question is a gap between the way that anyone, whether a political analyst or a business person, would assess a conventional politician, which is to try to ascribe a strategy to something and try to ascribe norms. Who are the people within the White House who might exert influence over this person? Those are all conventional questions for how we think about evaluating a president and what he might do next. I think what I continue to be struck by in covering Donald Trump is that it's kind of like entering a lion's den and judging the lions on their table manners. Like, you're taking an old framework to a situation where it's just completely non-applicable, right? And so I think that for the business community now, as we've heard, they're trying in a variety of ways, some public, like Bill Ackman talking about a nuclear economic winter, right, which is not he's prone to hyperbole, but it's still quite a statement to the likes of business leaders.
Is that accurate? I mean, I don't know who he is other than a person who spends a lot of time on X, but is he a person who's made an accurate prediction of what the economy is going to do?
I think that if these tariffs take effect as they're slated to on tomorrow, April 9th, and if they last for a certain amount of time, I think it will cause great damage to the global economy, yes. I mean, Bill Ackman is someone who's an activist investor, right? So there's a certain amount of hyperbolic comms that's always part of an activist style. But I think in this case, it really is it's a grave warning, and it's one that is true. But you see business people, rather, trying to exert their influence, again, in all the conventional ways, but it's just not sticking.